Hello, welcome to GP Podcast. Today, we're diving into one of the most incredible comeback stories in the history of technology. You know, that question? It sounds like it's straight out of a Hollywood movie, right? But this is the real-life story of AMD's unbelievable fight against the absolute giant Intel. And trust me, this isn't just a story about computer chips. It's a high-stakes tech thriller full of innovation, betrayal, and one of the greatest comebacks you'll ever hear about. Now, to really understand this war, we have to go all the way back to the beginning, back to the chaotic, Wild West birth of Silicon Valley. And it all kicks off with one man, a certified genius who is also a notoriously, difficult boss. Okay, let's unpack this, because it's a crazy ride. So in 1956, William Shockley wins the Nobel Prize for helping invent the transistor, a huge deal. And he starts his own company. But he was just impossible to work for. Super paranoid, super controlling. So just 1 year later, his 8 best engineers, they just walk out. They become famously known as the Traitorous Eight. And what do? They start Fairchild Semiconductor, which pretty much becomes a titan of the industry. But the cycle, it just keeps going. In '68, 2 of those original traitors, you might have heard of them, Gordon Moore and Robert Noyce, they leave Fairchild to start a little company called Intel. And then, the very next year, a super charismatic salesman from Fairchild, Jerry Sanders, gets together with a few other engineers and they leave to found AMD. It's just incredible when you think about it. The entire industry was practically born from this one brilliant, chaotic, and totally dysfunctional family tree. Right from the start, AMD knew it couldn't be Intel. It just didn't have the same research and development muscle. So, instead of trying to invent the next big thing from scratch, they chose a totally different path. A much, much smarter path for an underdog. So what's so interesting here is how it basically defines the battle lines for decades. You had Intel, the pioneer, the innovator, pushing the boundaries and creating whole new markets. And AMD's strategy? Well, they let Intel do all the heavy lifting. And then they'd come in and build a version of their hit product that was cheaper and often more reliable. Their first huge success, the AM9080 processor, was literally a direct clone of Intel's 8080. They weren't trying to be first. They were aiming to be the absolute best second choice you could make. Fast forward to 2006. AMD makes a move that at the time seemed both brilliant and maybe a little crazy. They bought ATI, a massive graphics card company. Just like that, they became the only company on planet Earth that designed both high-performance CPUs and high-performance GPUs. It was a huge, incredibly expensive bet on a future where graphics and processing would eventually merge. But for years, and I mean years, this bet looked like a terrible mistake that was just bleeding the company dry. As time went on, Intel's lead, it grew from just a gap into this massive, uncrossable chasm. AMD was really struggling to keep up. Their products kept falling further and further behind, and the company was locked in a death spiral. For a while there, it really seemed like there was no way out. By 2015, this was the price of one single share of AMD stock. $1.61. To put that in perspective, it was famously less than what you'd pay for a McDonald's hamburger. The market hadn't just lost faith, it had completely written them off for dead. So here's the bottom line. The company was completely cornered. You had Intel, the unbeatable king of CPUs, on one side, and NVIDIA, the absolute master of GPUs, on the other. And here's AMD, trying to do both, and frankly, failing at both. It really truly seemed like the end was right around the corner. But then a new CEO took over. Her name was Lisa Su. And in this moment of absolute do-or-die crisis, she took every last chip the company had left and pushed them all onto the table for one final, incredibly audacious bet. And that bet was on a completely new way to design a processor. See, for decades, Intel built what are called monolithic chips. Think of it like trying to build a house by carving it out of one single giant block of stone. AMD's idea was to completely abandon that and start using bricks. And this Lego analogy is just perfect. Instead of designing dozens of different super complex chips for every product, they just designed one perfect small 8-core Lego brick. Then they just made millions and millions of them. So you need a simple 6-core processor for a laptop? Easy. You take one brick and just disable 2 of the cores. Need an absolute monster 16-core beast for a workstation? You just connect 2 of those bricks together. It was simple, it was elegant, and it was absolutely revolutionary. This new approach, it gave AMD a massive, massive advantage. Intel's big, single-piece chips were incredibly expensive to make. A single tiny flaw and the whole costly chip was just garbage. But with AMD's small chiplets, a flaw only ruined one cheap little brick, not the whole processor. This meant their production costs just plummeted, their manufacturing success rate or yield skyrocketed, and they could build exactly what the market wanted almost on demand. It wasn't just a design change, it was a total manufacturing masterstroke. And then, in 2017, the world saw the result. This new architecture, this whole new philosophy hit the market under the name Ryzen. And all of a sudden, the company that everyone thought was dead and buried was back. And they weren't just back. They were delivering processors with more cores, at better prices, and with innovation that was changing the game. The launch of Ryzen didn't just save AMD, it completely reignited the chip war. Intel, which had kind of grown complacent sitting on its throne for so long, was caught completely, totally off guard. The entire market was turned on its head overnight. Now, Ryzen was incredible, but Intel still held on to one last crown, the title of Best for Gaming. So what did AMD do? They came up with this brilliantly simple, almost brute force solution. They figured out how to literally solder an extra slab of super high-speed memory right on top of the CPU. They called it 3D V-Cache, and it was an absolute game changer. And just like that, it was over. The X3D processors, powered by this crazy stacked cache technology, dethroned Intel. After decades of being number 2, AMD had finally captured the most coveted crown in the entire consumer CPU market. And the results? Well, they really do speak for themselves. Before Ryzen, AMD was just a minor player, fighting for scraps of market share. Today, thanks to that Zen architecture, they have completely reversed their fortunes, becoming a dominant force, especially in the enthusiast desktop market. It is truly one of the most stunning turnarounds in the history of tech. So AMD's journey from near bankruptcy to being a market leader, it's just an epic tale of strategic genius and incredibly bold innovation. They've wounded the old king, and for now, they've taken the throne. But in this industry, the only thing that's constant is change. And with Intel now fighting back with its own new designs, the chip war, well, it's far from over. If you liked this breakdown, please subscribe, leave a like, let me know what you liked most in the comments, and share it around. Thanks so much for watching.